Okay, so things are going to get interesting now. We're going to have some interactivity to the application. So what we've done here is we've added this input, and we've did this bind statement value, and we're going to bind it to Word. It's a two-way binding set up here. So that will generate a new bundle, and let's look at some of the code that this generates. So not as much code as last time, but there is a few interactivity handlers that's been added. So one thing, there's a new function here to add a space, and we also have our first listener. This is a vanilla JavaScript add event listener that I'm sure everybody knows what that is. And then it returns a callback here, which is just to remove that listener. That's pretty handy. So that saves us it saves the Svelte runtime-ish framework to have to rewrite all this stuff. So, and this here is actually a function that sets the value of an input. So that's what it is. Let's just jump down into the next change here. So now there's also this thing called listen dev. So I guess this is something that only happens on dev mode. There's something called modifiers. Okay, I'm not really sure about these dev functions, but put a breakpoint on them anyway. And we're actually creating some more text fragments here. We've got a space there, and then we have this input thing going on. And we're also appending the input to the page. We also have this input handler, and we have some invalidation going on. Alright, so let's just jump to the page and see this running in real time. So we're going to put our breakpoints this time then. So probably around line 46 is a good candidate here. And line 54. And this is showing 255. I think I'll also put one on the flush statement. Okay, so what next? 255. And let's also put one on this C function. And also this one here. And the handler as well. There's quite a lot of breakpoints we're putting in now. So I think we're good to go. Right, so let's just go back to the page here and refresh the page. So we'll be appending the elements, and then we'll be looking at interactivity. So here's the create functions. So we create our thing we've seen before, and we have this text element that's generated from the property. So let's see what's going on here. So the container element, the h1, text, 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 and then a space. I guess the space is because we want to add an input in between there and there. I think that's just because there is space in between these two. I guess if we delete this, then that space will go away. So that's what that space is for. So if we did if we joined them up together, we wouldn't have that last element there. Right, so then we're actually creating the input element. And I have two locations. So this is this listen dev is input. Let me step into that. I think I'll ask the core team what these listen dev functions do. Yeah, we'll just skip all that code now. Might come back to it though. So this is the actual real listener that listens to the text input. So there'll be a handler there. So there's this thing called dispose, which is when the component is destroyed. Okay, it's sort of wrapping a lot of functionality up here. So then we're actually going to append the things to the document. So we've got these text nodes, 1, 2. So we're appending the values. We're setting the initial value. I've kind of stepped back too much here actually. So we've appended these. Don't see them yet on the screen. Set input value. So we're going to set the initial value of the form of the input value. So it's going to be probably an empty string right now. That's just the no, that's actually the value is getting set on the input from the variable, because remember we've bound it already. So this is bound already here. So we're setting the initial value, and that's interesting. So the compiler is known to set that value already because of this context here, and we're setting it to our input, which is stored up here. Okay, we're going to continue, and this is just a vanilla element, and the course value is going to be empty, and then it's going to setting it to that, and we'll see that value rendered on the screen. Got something called mount component, and I've got this render callback. I'm wondering why we're not seeing the elements rendered right now. They are rendered. Or maybe it's just the graphics hasn't caught up yet with it. Right, F8. So have we done any dirty components? No, we don't. So we've got this thing called add render callback. So we've rendered things apparently. We've not seen the graphics rendered yet. And do we have any errors in the console? No, we don't. What is that? Okay, on destroy. Right, skip this. Okay, so we've got this stuff rendered now. I don't claim to understand this because I haven't written it. It's compile generated, but I suppose we could read about it somewhere on the docs. So let's just type something here and see what code gets executed. So we have of course our invalid input handler, and so we have the value of the input, and that is the vanilla input. So you can tell it's vanilla because when you hover over it, it highlights it on the page like that, right? So we get this variable. We set this variable. Of course, world is up here, and I have this invalidate function. So let's see what that invalidate function does. This is where things get actually proper and interesting, because this is invalidation, is like the secret of the code that's generated, optimized code. So let's step into this invalidate function and see what is going on and attempt to understand it. So let's see. I have this key here, word, and then there's the current value, the input, and we have this assignment here, value equals this one. Okay, so let's just see. So we've got this thing, if there's this context, and if the context key, okay, so context, so the if world, and then have an assignment here. So why are we doing that? So that's going to return world, and then this one is going to change that to equal to the new value there, and then we want to confirm that they're not equal, which you'd expect. Okay, it's in an assignment, and then okay, if it's not equal, then we're going to continue. So let's just test that. And then got this thing called bound. There's nothing bound already. Blank object. So if ready, true. Make dirty. Let's just step into that then. So component is this app, and they've got this key, which will be word. So if component is not dirty, then we're going to push it to dirty components, this component. Run this schedule update function. Okay, let's go back to our code to check that. Line 75. Let's do that later on. In fact, it's the wrong project. 75. Don't let that previous screen scare you, because that's something I would just explain after I finish this part of the video. So line 75, schedule update. Okay, so what does that do? We've got this thing, this flag here, update scheduled. Let's just check what that is. Okay, it's just defined there. So update scheduled is false, so if it's not scheduled, I'm going to set that to true, and then this thing called resolved promise. So we're going to have this resolve API, and then this thing called flush. Step into that. Scene callbacks is a new set. Okay, let's just press continue here. Right, so now we have dirty components.lens, and we've added the app to the dirty components list. And so we're going to get one off this array. So now dirty components is empty. And set the current component to this component. And we're going to run update on the update method on this object here. And the update function, let's go back into our code, it's line 114. Why is my Mac so slow today? I'm really looking forward to the 16-inch Mac coming out. Otherwise I'd just get the current 15-inch one. Get them good deals on the current 15-inch Macs. Right, so let's go and let's find out what this update function is. 114. So what does it do? It's taking this thing called fragment, which is this thing. We'll run the update method on this dirty object, dirty property. I've got this noop thing again, I'm not sure what that's for. Run all. So skip out of this. Fragment p dirty context update. So okay, so what is this going on here? We've got this change thing, we've got our context here, and if change.word set data, set data. So this set data is wrapping something else, and I'm going to actually remove the dev option on the compiler to get rid of these dev functions, because it's just making it more complicated, and it's all it is it's basically helping you to debug things at runtime, but we don't really need to do all that for how the compiler works. Right, so let's step into this. So we'll compare what happens when we remove the dev options in the compiler soon. So it's text, element, and we've got the data here. So we're doing some string concatenation. So text is input, data is the word, new word. So data is going to be equal to this that. If text.data, if text.data equals that, which is not, we'll dispatch this thing we'll just ignore, and then we're actually, this is the actual update right here. Right here is where the action is happening. See, that's a change there. Ain't that whoopie-doo cool? Right, so then we've got this thing called changed word, and input value is not equal to this one. So input of value, if it's not equal to that, then we set it again. I guess that's the two-way binding, is it? Something. Not sure. So that's the input. We wouldn't need to set the input there, because if we're getting it from the input to the variable. So let's just go through. Almost to the end, folks. Sorry about this really difficult episode for you guys to watch. Congratulations if you're still watching it, by the way. I applaud you. And then nothing in after each, I think. We'll just double check. No, I don't. Okay. Continue. Okay. That is it. That is it. We've reached the end, folks. It's coming to an end. Right, let's just check in that code and then turn off the def compiler methods, and then look at what that removes. Okay, so let's just check our code here. We've got our code, and we've got our bundle here. We're just going to commit this, and we're going to turn off the dev mode to compile, make it easier for it to understand what's going on. So I guess we'll just say add two-way bound input. And now we're going to go to roll up, and I think I'm just going to, I wonder if that's default. So production, it's not production. So let's just check to see if that turns it off. Can't remember the default actually. I mean, rollup's pretty smart. It knows how to turn off the compiler when it's changed. Okay, great. So it's changed the bundle. Right, so finally, yeah, that's nice. So we don't have location information there. We have this thing called set data, and we're not using custom events, so I guess we're not dispatching any custom compiler information or runtime information at this point. I reckon that information that'll be added back in once you do proper custom events normally, but we don't need it for when we're not having dev and not using custom events in the app. So interestingly, has it got any of the dev things in there? Right, so look at all this stuff that we don't have anymore here. So the things like add append dev, we're instead of wrapping it and dispatching it in this event, we're just calling the actual modifying code directly. And it's got a little bit more simple here as well. We're not wrapping things in a const block. We are removing some debug information as well. Good, this is a bit more cleaner, a bit more easy to understand, I think. Oh, this is all valuable stuff that we can use. Then this is just checking to see, yeah, stuff that you'd normally get wrong at runtime and then fix it. But we just want to make it more simple to try and figure out what the actual real code is, as I've said 100 times. So look at how much more simple this one is. I should have done this right at the start, but I've made the videos now. It is what it is. So we can see here that we're extending Svelte component now instead of this one. And here we just init, and we just call super instead of having all this stuff here that we don't need to display for production. Okay, that makes sense. So one last thing I'll show you guys is I looked at the source code in Svelte, and there's in actual code, as we can see here, there's on the Svelte source internal, there's a dev and there's DOM. So the dev stuff wraps the DOM stuff. So for example, listen dev is what I showed you before. It wraps and calls the listen function here, which then adds an event listener, but also has all these checks here. So that's what I wanted to show you. You can go and just check the differences there. But anyway, we're not going to have any of this dev stuff to confuse our minds while we're trying to do stuff. Also, if you go to REPL on the site here, you can go and do stuff like, if you look at the compiler options, you can actually go in here and turn off dev as well too. But this actually doesn't have the full information. These properties at the top aren't expanded out. So anyway, you can go and check the source code here to figure out what is actually going on. And I understand it better now. Alright, thanks very much for this video. Next video, I think what we'll do is we'll probably do some reactive stuff. Have a reactive variable and see what that outputs. Okay, should be getting simpler because we kind of got our base here now, and we'll just start really learning. Okay, thanks very much. See you. Bye bye.